I call to order the resumption of the September 16th, 2020 meeting of the Morris Township Committee. The legal notice required in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act has been satisfied, and a statement certifying same will be executed. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. We apologize for the slight delay. We were delayed getting started. We begin tonight with a tribute to September 11th. Last Friday marked the 19th anniversary of the attacks on the World Trade Center, which killed nearly 3,000 people, including 64 people from Morris County and 6 from Morris Township. The pain and horror of that terrible day are seared into our collective memories. Each year, the Morris Township Committee commemorates September 11th. Each year, we remember those who perished. We reach out to comfort the survivors as well as their friends and families. And we especially honor the heroism of those who gave their lives in service to others that day and beyond. This year, our tribute includes music. There's nothing like music to touch our souls in a way that words alone cannot reach. The song you are about to hear, "The Bravest," tells a story. We offer it as a tribute, not only to those who perished, but those who survived. And we also offer it with deep and lasting gratitude for the heroism of the 243 firefighters who gave their lives that day while saving others. At this point, I'll ask Mr. Daly if you could please play the video and the song.
First plane hit the North Star right after I came in. It left a gaping fiery hole where officers had been.
I ask that we take a moment of silence to remember and reflect on the meaning of this occasion. "19 years later, let us honor each other, let us comfort each other, and let us never forget." And thank you to Mr. Quinn for bringing this video and song to our attention. Next up, we have approval of the minutes from our August 19th regular meeting and our special meetings of August 26th and September 3rd. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I'll move the minutes from those two meetings, Mayor.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, we have one more, we have a proclamation tonight. As you may know, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. The mental health concerns the COVID pandemic has created for all of us, this occasion is particularly significant this year. We have a proclamation. I'd like to read it into the record, and then I'd like to say a few words following that about an event we have coming up next week. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas September is known around the United States and globally as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, whereas the goals of Suicide Prevention Awareness Month include raising the visibility of mental health resources and suicide prevention services available in our community, removing the stigma from talking about mental health and suicide, building understanding of the causes of suicide and how to prevent it, and helping those in need get appropriate support services. Whereas, according to statistics from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people, ages 10 to 34 in the United States. 48,344 people died by suicide across the United States in 2008, a number more than twice the number of homicides, and active military and veterans account for 13.5% of all suicides nationally. And whereas suicidal thoughts can affect anyone regardless of age, gender, race, orientation, income level, religion, or background. Whereas during the COVID-19 pandemic, anxiety and stress have increased dramatically over fears of getting sick, worries about lost income and unemployment, social isolation, challenges around schooling, and overall uncertainties about the future. And whereas calls to New Jersey's suicide prevention hotlines have escalated as a result of the pandemic, and according to CDC, in a report issued in August, 1 in 4 young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 said they had considered suicide in the past month because of the pandemic, and more than 40% of those surveyed indicated they have experienced a mental or behavioral health concern connected to COVID-19. And whereas, in accordance with our values as a stigma-free community, the Township of Morris chooses to publicly state and place our full support behind local educators, mental health professionals, athletic coaches, PAC leaders, police officers, and parents as partners in supporting our community in simply being available to one another. And we encourage all residents to take the time to inquire as to the well-being of their family, friends, and neighbors, and to offer them support and resources, because a simple gesture of caring can go a long way toward helping someone realize that they are not alone and suicide is not the answer. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Morris Township Committee does hereby proclaim our recognition and support of September 2020 as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. I wanted to mention also briefly that we are doing an educational presentation next week. It's called Let's Talk About Suicide Prevention. It will be offered September 24th, next Thursday, from 7 to 8:30 p.m. It will include the personal story of a suicide survivor, Len Resto, who currently sits on the Chenaborough Council. It will include a presentation by someone from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention called Talk Saves Lives, and another presentation called One Thing You Can Do, given by a representative from Moms Demand Action. There will also be a little bit of time for a Q&A. This event is intended to be interesting and thought-provoking as well as informative. You can find more information on our website, and there's a flyer that we've posted on our Facebook page. We invite everyone to join us on the 24th. I do think this is a very important event, and we will hope to see you there. So with that, I believe next up, we have our consideration of the ordinance regarding what we call the marketplace. So I will turn it over to Mr. Carlson and ask for you to read the ordinance into the record, please.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. I'd like to
Sorry.
let the public know that this is up for public hearing and final consideration.
Mr. Carlson, one moment. Mr. Grayson wants to make a comment.
I just wanted to suggest
Sure.
that you alert the public as to how the meeting's going to flow, because we're changing it around a little bit, just so people
I know, I
understand.
will. I'm going to have him introduce.
And then you'll explain?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
With that, we have up an ordinance for public hearing and final consideration. This is ordinance 19-20. This is an ordinance amending, the redevelopment plan for block 10401, lot 3, located on East Hanover Avenue in the Township of Morris, otherwise known as the Marketplace redevelopment or the Colgate redevelopment.
Okay, thank you. This is our second read and public hearing on the Marketplace. We have with us tonight Mr. Paul Phillips, our planner, who will begin with a presentation. And before we get to that, I just want to summarize, as Mr. Grazel was alluding to, how we're going to work tonight. We will begin with Mr. Phillips giving us a summary of a little background and the contents of the amended plan before us this evening. And then it will be opened up for public comment. We will allow people to come up and you can raise your digital hand. You can comment for 5 minutes. We will be letting you know at 4 minutes and then 30 seconds when your time is about to expire. If you wish to come up again, we will allow people to comment further for a 5-minute comment, up to 3 times during the course of the evening. Mr. Phillips will be collecting the questions and comments that come up. He'll be taking copious notes, and he will be answering those questions once everyone from the public has shared their questions and comments. So with that,
Sorry, just for clarity, I had been referring to the general public commentary, which we usually have at the front of the meeting.
Oh,
just to explain to people that we're changing the agenda a little bit to have this hearing first.
Yes.
And any public commentary has to do with this this ordinance before us, and then we'll go to general public commentary. Correct. Right after.
Okay. I don't need to repeat that. Mm-hmm. It is on the agenda, and we are putting this public hearing first, followed by the public comment period, the general public commentary, as Mr. Grazel just said. So with that, I believe we're set, and with that, I think I'll turn it over to Mr. Phillips.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to everyone. Probably a brief history is in order to start. So back in 2017, the township adopted a redevelopment plan for the former Colgate manufacturing facility. And that redevelopment plan adoption followed the property being declared as an area in need of redevelopment, consistent with the state's local redevelopment and housing law. The plan essentially divides the property into 2 sections for development. There's a front section or portion which is nearest to East Hanover Avenue. That portion of the property was designated for commercial development, and the rear portion of the property was designated for residential as well as open space development. I would also just add that the plan was amended a year later in 2018. And that was done to increase the number of affordable housing units on the residential section of the property. As you may recall, that this development includes affordable housing units that helps the municipality satisfy its fair share housing obligation. Also, as you're well aware, the residential portion of the development is well underway and in construction. However, as you're also aware, because you probably pass the site on a daily basis, no commercial development has taken place yet. And that's notwithstanding the fact that a site plan approval was obtained for the commercial portion of the project, and that site plan approval dates back to 2018. So since that site plan approval, 2 years have transpired and there's been no development at all on the commercial portion of the project. There are a number of reasons why that's the case, not the least of which has to do with the challenges that clearly exist and have existed for some time in the retail marketplace. And that would basically be related in part to e-commerce. And I don't have to kind of tell everyone that that's only been aggravated by the advent of COVID-19. So with that said, over the last number of months, the property owner developer has essentially worked with the administration and the township's professionals to effectuate some changes to the redevelopment plan. Those changes are reflected in the amended plan, which is under consideration tonight. And they are essentially intended to achieve two objectives. The first objective is to basically put the developer in a more favorable and competitive position to be able to respond to the changing retail environment, and specifically in terms of the tenant mix, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But at the same time, these amendments also basically seek to provide additional improvements and amenities on the site that would make the project more pedestrian friendly and walkable and sort of more of a destination generally. And in that regard, I think special mention needs to go to the mayor, the deputy mayor, and Mr. Geoffrey for pushing those changes that would basically require now, as part of the redevelopment plan amendment, those amenities to be part and parcel of any future site plan application to the planning board. With that said, the major changes to the redevelopment plan would include expanding the list of allowable uses. So we've included, for example, specifically health and wellness, which is sort of a growth industry, if you will, in the retail marketplace, together with including instructional schools and studios. Again, a growth industry, and certainly a growth industry pre-COVID. And we've also included pet care and grooming as part of the list of allowable uses. We've also allowed we're allowing the same number of drive-through establishments as was provided in the original plan. There was a maximum of 3. The original plan only allowed one of the 3 to be either a restaurant or an eating and drinking establishment. We've now held the 3 maximum, but we've allowed up to the 3 to be either a restaurant or eating and drinking establishment, again, in order to respond to the current marketplace. By the same token, we have established requirements for pedestrian connectivity throughout the entire commercial component, as well as with connections to the adjoining streets, so that there would be the availability of pedestrian connections to and within the development. We put in a requirement that there be a pocket park, which would serve as a destination and where certain events could take place within the development. And we've also put in a requirement that there would be a minimum of 2 outdoor plaza areas that would provide seating and potentially seating in connection with outdoor restaurants. Again, all of these new requirements are intended to make the project basically both more pedestrian friendly and also to hopefully make the development more of a destination. The other changes that are part of the plan would include, we now have provision for electric vehicle charging stations in strategic locations within the project. We have instituted some relaxation of the requirement with regard to distance between buildings in the commercial component, provided certain conditions are met. We've established certain specifications and standards for the drive-through restaurants or eating and drinking establishments in terms of square footage and seating. And we've also provided for the phasing of same relative to the overall project build out. There's a change to the residential component. There was some relaxation of the parking standards for the affordable units, recognizing the income restrictions as well as the bedroom distribution. But by the same token, we also put in a specific provision requiring guest parking for the affordable building. While there's no change in the freestanding commercial sign, we do now allow or proposing to allow for more than 3 tenants on that sign at the developer's discretion, although the size of the sign stays the same. We've also provided for an increase in the maximum height of the berm. It is now can be up to a 16-foot high berm. And again, the berm is intended to separate the commercial from the residential portion of the development and to afford protections to the residential segment of the development. And then lastly, and I don't know, Jim, if we have this that we can screen share, but we incorporated the latest concept plan that was part of the changes, many of the changes that I have just discussed. We've incorporated that in and referenced it in the document. It's in the appendix to the document as illustrative of the new layout and site design. And that's intended to provide a framework for the planning board. There it is. A framework for the planning board when a formal site plan application is made, so that the ultimate site plan, which goes before the planning board, has something that the board can reference, since this plan was the basis of many of the amendments that I just discussed. So with that said, Mayor, that basically summarizes the plan. The bulk of the other provisions in the plan with regard to the maximum square footage and the coverage and so forth, they pretty much remain as is. It is just the specifics that I mentioned that are part of the overall amendment that you will be considering this evening. So if there are any questions or comments, I'd also add that Jim Slade is with us this evening, and he was involved and participated with regard to the meetings that I mentioned that we had with the developer, as well as the amended redevelopment plan document itself.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. What I'd like to do at this point is give anyone from the Township Committee who would like to ask any questions of Mr. Phillips, or if you have any quick comments.
Sure, I would.
Okay, Mr. Grazel.
Thanks. So just, Jim, if you could go back to the picture, I was about to ask you to use your cursor if you could. So just for edification of the public, you'll see 2 blue, what look like, well, 3 of them actually, pools or ponds. Just so everybody understands, those are detention basins. Those are not meant to be filled. Most of the time they will be empty and they'll just be sort of grassed areas. But they're there to retain water during heavy rainstorms, so don't be confused by those. Those are just temporary features that'll probably be filled 2 or 3 days during the year and empty for the rest. I wanted Jim to point out with his cursor the 2 pedestrian plazas that we incorporated. There's one that he's pointing at, if you can follow his cursor. That used to be a parking area, and we worked with the developer, and although the Township Committee did push on the developer for some of these improvements, I must add that the developer was a partner in achieving these improvements. The development, he has been very supportive of what we want to do. He wants to see this mall obviously be a great success, and we think these improvements do. So that one area that Jim pointed to was a parking area, and now is a pedestrian plaza. I think he's trying to zoom in. There we go, that one right there. You see there's a walking path, there's some greenery in there. We're looking at possibly putting a water feature in one of the 2 pedestrian plazas, maybe water feature in the park. So point to the second pedestrian plaza that'll be right there between two of the buildings. So that used to be a parking area and a area where cars could drive through. So that's another pedestrian plaza where people can gather. We're hopeful that maybe at that pedestrian plaza, there'll be restaurants that face inwards towards the plaza as opposed to just facing frontwards towards the street. And it could be a lively place where people could gather and feel like they're part of a bigger community by gathering at this place. And then the pocket park in the back is right back there. So sort of between the two pedestrian plazas is that. All of that will be connected by a walking path. So you could circulate through the mall to the pedestrian plazas, to the pocket park in the back. We envision a possible performance stage at the pocket park in the back, so that very small performances. So maybe a magician or a small, jazz trio or something like that could perform on the weekends or in the evenings. To be determined, but the developer was very helpful in putting in a performance stage, so we're grateful for that. There's going to be a nice walkway through that pocket park in the back. And all of this will also connect to the surrounding neighborhood. So you can see this, we worked very hard, and the planning board is still going to have to do some work, but making the whole area connective within the mall itself and connecting it to the community of Collinsville, which is to the east, the existing neighborhood and the new neighborhood created behind it. There's going to be connectivity to that as well. So we worked a lot on making this more walkable and pedestrian friendly. And just also to be clear to the public that this is just a concept plan. And after the hearing tonight, we're going to be taking this to the planning board, and the planning board will do the site specific design for this plan. So there will be additional hearings before the planning board to talk about the specifics of the plan. But I'm very pleased with the improvements we made by removing some of the parking, adding those pedestrian plazas. It started off as kind of what I viewed as just a New Jersey strip mall, and we've improved it to a place where I feel like our residents can go and gather for a few hours. We don't have many what I call destinations here in Morris Township, so this could possibly be one where you could literally go and hang out for 3 or 4 hours, enjoy the shops, but also enjoy the outdoor spaces, enjoy the multiple food vendors who are going to be there. So again, I just want to thank thank Mr. Jorfi, who was really my colleague in pushing for a lot of these things, and thank the developer for being a partner in making the improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grayson. I will say that my part in this negotiation, I pushed for us to hold a meeting with the public, especially the neighbors who live on the what's called the collection at Morristown. Should be Morris Township, but anyway, the people who are already living on the residential portion of the site, as well as neighbors from the Collinsville community, we did hold an informal meeting with neighbors. I believe it was on August 5th, the day after the terrible storm. We had good attendance at that meeting. We had a lot of good questions, information shared. And I did want to ask Mr. Phillips for one follow-up to that. There was some discussion at that meeting about some of the neighbors having safety concerns. I believe it had to do with lighting. And I'm not sure if you know anything about that, or if that will go to the site plan level. I just wanted to follow up on that. I know there was a conversation between some of the neighbors and the developer on some of their concerns.
So lighting is one of the sort of threshold issues, Mayor, that is generally taken up during the site plan approval process, and certainly the sensitivity of lighting in the commercial area to the residential area is one that the board will be cognizant of. And at the time of site plan approval, the developer will have to basically submit what its intent is in terms of a lighting plan. And though in terms of the intensity, the height of the light poles, when lights are shut on and off. All those issues are properly held and will be addressed at the site plan approval stage.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the Township Committee who has any questions or comments they'd like to share with the public before we open it up?
There, I have some comments.
Mr. Jorfi, go ahead.
Was someone else up?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to again echo what's already been said, and thank you to our professionals for working on this. I appreciate the openness of the developer to work with us on this project, literally going row by row in the parking lots, trying to basically remove blacktop and put in green space to try to make this a lot more palatable for our residents and for customers, quite frankly. I think it's an important step to modernizing how we plan commercial development in the area. And I think it's welcome relief from what we see everywhere in our state of concrete and blacktop strip malls. And by even, the improvements we've made in getting green space, trees, open areas for people to congregate and stay and socialize and continue to basically support what will be local businesses in this development, I think is a win-win. And I'd also like to point out and thank the professionals and the developer in putting in electric vehicle charging too. I'm a strong believer that local governments are going to have to pitch in to try to embrace the infrastructure of tomorrow. And by having this into a commercial area where folks will be staying for 30 minutes to an hour, that's an ideal place for electric vehicle charging. And it will encourage, quite frankly, I think high-end retail, those with high-end vehicles, electric vehicles, to come to our town, to charge up, to shop, to do their grocery shopping here, and really provide a great impact to our town while being responsible and sustainable. So I just want to thank everyone for their support. I appreciate Jeff's walkthrough of the improvements we've made, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in the site plan.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Peter here.
Yes, Mr. Mancuso.
Going back about 18 months, maybe 2 years, we were trying to get our fair share housing quota fixed. And we were 30 to 40 low and moderate income homes short. And I would say that the beginning developer, Mr. Forgione, stepped right up and took the 30 more units to help us with our fair share obligation. And that's something that I will never forget. So I'd like to add that to all the good work that's been done here.
Thank you. Is that it? Okay, so at this point, we're going to open it up for public comment. Like I said, it'll be a 5-minute time limit. And if you could raise your digital hand, and Mr. Daly will be calling on people who would like to comment.
I don't know who jumped on here first, but we have 2 people so far. Nicole?
Just be clear that we're only taking comments on the
Yes,
project.
this public comment is just on the marketplace. We will follow this with general public comment. I said that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just said,
Okay.
once you're allowed to talk, Nicole's first.
Okay, so we have Nicole Pitaluga. And if you would say your name and address for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Nicole Pitaluga, and I'll spell that for the record. P as in Paul, I-T-T as in Tom, A-L-U-G-A. And I live at 22 Molly Stark Drive.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm very excited about this project. I'm actually on vacation, but I saw Jeff's post today on Facebook, and I am part of an organization called MOMI, Museum of Imagination and Innovation, and we are a nonprofit that's been working for 3 years to bring more playful learning opportunities to the children of New Jersey. And I think this program, this park, this project could be a wonderful partner in this effort to bring more what we call playful learning landscapes to New Jersey. This effort came out of Temple University's Children's Lab, where researchers were trying to make everyday places in the community, like bus stops and parks and libraries, more opportunities for children to learn, because children spend about 80% of their time outside of school. So given the fact that you're having affordable housing and you're close to the Collinsville neighborhood and you're trying to make this place more interesting to our community where people are going to want to spend more time, I believe that considering doing a playful learning landscape in the Pocket Park or in one of the outdoor plazas would be a great opportunity for our community. What these programs do, these landscapes do, is they bring more engaging opportunities for caregivers to interact with children in ways that kind of guide their learning in everyday natural environments. So I just see it as such a great match to what you already, have going and you're putting in place with these improvements that you're making to this marketplace. The performance stage and the pedestrian plaza would fit so nicely into just this project would fit really nicely into enhancing all of that. So I would love to share some more information about what's going on around the country in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and places all around the country and the world to implement these playful learning landscapes. They're actually very evidence-based in terms of there's a lot of data on how children learn and how they can learn in everyday places. So I would just like to put that out there and see if I can provide some more information for that to be under consideration.
How interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And do you have information that you could send us?
Yes, I have a great deal of information from Temple University, as well as the Playful Learning Landscape Action Network. We actually are collaborating with them right now to try to bring a workshop to New Jersey for different parks and recs departments and government leaders and different organizations that are interested in, healthcare and wellness, and making communities more of a place where people want to live, work, and play. You want people to stay in your community and find it very interesting. We don't have a lot of really interesting parks and, public art spaces and things in New Jersey that we see when we go to other states. So we would love for Morris Township to be a model for that.
I think it's very interesting, and I'd like to be in touch with you about that.
Great. Does anybody else?
We will be in touch. You
Okay.
you can reach out to us, or we'll reach out to you.
Okay, I did send an email to Jeff earlier this evening, so I will follow up with you. Thank you.
And
Nicole, you could probably send it to the whole committee too. I'm interested in learning more.
Sure, Mark. Okay.
Thank you.
Nicole and I did have a conversation last year when she, at the beginning of when she started this organization, and I've been thinking ever since about how we could incorporate some of that work into Morris Township, and I didn't make the connection. So I'm very happy that you called in, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time, because I didn't make that connection myself, and I think you're spot on that this would be a great spot to do some of the work that you're talking about.
Okay, I definitely will send it to the whole committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, is this Mr. Jim O'Reilly?
Should be coming on in a moment.
Now can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, Jim O'Reilly, 50 Independence Way. First, from the east, roughly that arrow is pointing north, right? So from the east to the west side of the development, what is the distance?
From the
Along the length, not the width.
that we are taking questions, although you may be our last questioner. So what we're doing, Jim, is we're taking questions, and Mr. Phillips is going to answer all the questions about the plan at the end.
Okay.
But it may come quickly.
Okay, that's one question. I take it that all the buildings in the middle of the parking lots are commercial buildings, and the residential area is like to the south side of the property, south of the part of the, what do you call it, the trees and grass, right? And furthermore, what is adjacent to the south side of the property where all those housing units are? What are they looking out on? And what is the status of that? What is the zoning for that?
Okay, we'll take those questions. Mr.
Oh,
Phillips, I'm sure, has written them down.
One other question. In general, when properties like this become available, is consideration ever given of turning the whole thing into a park?
Could you say that again?
When properties like this become available, is consideration ever given to turning the whole thing into a park? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can answer.
I mean, I feel like we said we were gonna do it a certain way and we
Okay.
should do it.
Okay.
If there's no one else on,
There's one more person that came up,
okay, we'll take that person.
just comes up as Julie.
Julie, okay,
Do we have a mistake there?
yes, we did.
Julie, can you hear us?
Are you there, Julie? Julie?
She's not coming, there's a microphone coming up. The hand's there, but there's
Julie,
no mic.
we do not see your mic. It may have your sound turned off.
Oh, yeah, you should mention that. If you're on the phone, dial *9.
Yes, if you're on the phone, dial *9 to ask your question. Okay, Julie, I'm hoping you can hear us. We're gonna come back to you. Hopefully you can get your sound. It looks from our end like your sound is not turned on at your end, your audio. So with that,
There's one more.
There's one more.
yeah, we're gonna, Jeannie?
Jeannie has a microphone. Will be coming on in a second.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please say your name and address for the record.
Jeannie McKay, 10 Walnut Street, Mars Township. I don't know if this is the correct meeting to ask, but last month when we talked, we were talking about the different entrances and exits, the driveways. And one caller last month asked about a no left turn out of the MLK side. And because Highland Avenue is direct, like not directly, but right across the street. And then there's that driveway for the industrial where the school buses come out. And what is going to happen there as far as the traffic turning left and right?
Okay, we've got your questions. What we said, we're running this the same way that we ran our previous public hearing on the other site, the Abbey. We're taking questions and Mr. Phillips is going to answer all of them after they've all been shared. Okay, so your question is about the left turn onto MLK and the left turn out of the driveway where the school buses are housed, right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Left and
Mr.
right.
Phillips will be answering that.
Okay, thank you.
Jeannie, did you have anything else?
I don't know, the cursor, when they were showing the cursor, like towards the MLK side, that's a walkway there, right? That's not for cars. Towards the bottom of the picture, yes, right there.
That?
Go up a little bit and move to the left, like that. Is that a walkway?
The tan is the walkway.
So this is a walkway across the top of the berm, and this is roadway and roadway, obviously.
But there's another walkway.
So there's another roadway there?
There's another walkway adjacent the detention basin.
Okay,
This is
wait, so
opposite
that's
Highland.
right where you have the cursor now, okay? That's a roadway.
That's the Highland, Fort Myers.
This is MLK,
Yes.
this is Highland Ave, and this is an entrance into the commercial development.
Okay, so right down from there, there's another entrance right next to the group home, right?
Correct, that's the entrance into the residential development. It's off the screen.
How are all these driveways and entrances gonna be making left and right turns right in front of each other? Like, how is that gonna work?
It's a good question.
Good question.
We will get that answered, Jeannie.
She's back, but she's got no microphone. Try her again.
Is that it?
Yep. Well, we muted her. Now I'm going to try Julie again. Let's see if the microphone comes up. There it goes. It's coming.
Julie?
Now can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. If you could say your name and address for the record, please, Julie.
Julie Winter, 210 Mount Kimball Ave. And I
I
have
didn't get your number on Mount Kimball.
210.
210. Thank you.
Previous speaker said there were 3 possible drive-throughs. Was I hearing that correct? And they could all be restaurants?
Yes.
So like it could be 3 fast food restaurants?
We to be determined, and that'll be part of Mr. Phillips' answer when he's answering everyone's questions.
Okay, and then as far as the type of trees, is that part of this meeting or that would be a future meeting? Input on the trees.
Yeah,
That's part of site plan.
okay, Paul will answer it, or Mr. Phillips will answer that.
And the input on the facade, would that be this meeting or a future meeting?
Facade would be site plan also. Mr. Phillips will talk about these things.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no one else right now. My suggestion is that we have Mr. Phillips answer the questions that are on the table. And then there may be, I can imagine a few more people perhaps wanting to ask a few more questions afterwards. So, Mr. Phillips, are you there?
I'm here.
And able to answer the questions that have been answered, or have been asked so far?
Yes, I believe so. I may need Jim's help. I'm trying to scale off. I couldn't remember. I think well, let me just back up and deal. The first member of the public was Nicole, and I think she just had some positive comments overall and is going to share some additional information with the TC. I don't think I need to provide any additional response other than I concur with the TC members that it might be a very good mix between what her nonprofit is seeking to do and what we're providing on this site. Mr. O'Reilly asked for the distance, and Jim, I don't know. I remember that it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood. That frontage is like maybe close to 2,000 feet. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to estimate 1,500, but honestly, that's a guess, and I don't have a plan in front of me to scale it. But I mean, I might say it's between 1,500 and 2,000 feet to be safe.
And I would concur with that. It's an extensive amount of frontage, as you can see from the illustrative plan. And I was remembering something on the neighborhood of 2,000, but it's probably, Jim's correct, it's probably between 1,500 and 2,000 square feet, 2,000 lineal feet, rather. Mr. O'Reilly also asked about the surrounding properties and recognized that the illustrative plan here, which is intended to mirror the amendments to the commercial portion, which are in the text, does not include the entire residential development that's part of Colgate, which as you go further to the south, there is residential, largely market rate townhouses, but also the 60-unit affordable building and the 6 additional supportive housing units. And as you go beyond that and go further down MLK, the land use pattern, the surrounding land use pattern is somewhat mixed. It includes residential on both sides of the street. And then as you further go down MLK, there is also, as you're aware, some industrial property. So it's a bit of a mix of uses, and particularly industrial on the Colgate side of MLK. On the opposite side, it's more residential in nature. Jeannie asked about a couple of things about the no left turn at MLK. So back when the developer obtained site plan approval for the commercial portion in 2018, they were required to do traffic studies, traffic impact studies, and to look at all of the movements into and out of the site. And my recollection at that time was that there was no prohibition on the left out of MLK because it was considered to be a safe movement based on the traffic analysis that was done at the time. The only other thing I will say is if the developer is going to come in for a new site plan approval based on this concept, then certainly the issue of traffic and access and whether movements are safe will be revisited. So, that issue will come up again at the time. And with regard to the driveway proximity, same issue. Those are issues that will be dealt with by the planning board at the time of site plan approval. And certainly the issue with regard to those movements into and out of the driveways, given their separation, will be an issue that the planning board will address as part of the overall traffic and site circulation. And then Julie asked a number of questions. I would concur with the mayor. The issue of the facades will be addressed at the time of site plan approval. And any other trees or landscaping, also the specs on that will be part of they will have to basically file a landscaping plan, as I mentioned earlier, together with a lighting plan. And then lastly, 3 restaurants with drive-throughs are allowed. We provided some specifications for those drive-throughs in terms of the size and the seating, looking to get desired tenants that were recognized, that were basically brought to us by the developer. We cannot, in the redevelopment plan, say that the tenant has to be and name that tenant. You can't do that, but you can provide specifications so that the probability is that certain of those tenants will be attracted to the site. And I think we've got 2 separate drive-throughs as part of this concept and 1 end cap, meaning there would be a drive-through at the end of a multi-store building. But the short answer is yes. And the issues with regard to the location, the queuing, the overall circulation of those drive-throughs will be subject to planning board approval at the site plan stage as well. So Mayor, I think I've addressed all the issues that were raised by members of the public. Jim, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I think you covered the issues. Thanks.
You did, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up?
I would just add that the questions that have been asked, I've heard them asked by residents frequently in other settings. And I would emphasize to the public how it's very important for the public to show up if this does go before the planning board for site plan approval, because a lot of these decisions and issues that are really of interest to many people, they would be addressed at the site plan level of the planning board. So please, keep that in mind. And I did want to ask if you, Mr. Phillips, could, phasing. I don't think too many people understand what that is, and I think that's an important concept that we've added. If you could just elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, we've had, as you know, Mayor, a number of discussions with the developer, and I would concur with also the comments that were made by the deputy mayor and Mr. Giorfi. The developer has been very cooperative and accommodating in terms of meeting some of the requests that we've talked about this evening and making this an overall better plan. The developer has indicated that they intend on, number 1, coming in for site plan approval for the entire building square footage on the commercial component. So that would kind of reflect what's before you on the screen this evening. And they've also reflected their intent to do the complete build out of all of the buildings that are shown that would basically be allowed based on the maximum square footage, which is set forth in the redevelopment plan. However, we wanted to do a little bit of an additional safeguard to that. What we kind of didn't want to see is notwithstanding how many buildings were built and received building permits, we didn't want to see just 3 drive-through restaurants. So we put in an additional requirement that before the 3rd drive-through is built, that at least 50% of the total floor area of the commercial development had to have a C of O. So notwithstanding the fact that the buildings may otherwise have been built, we basically want to see tenants in those other buildings as well. So we added that provision into the plan, which would require the developer to have C of Os for at least half the space in order to basically do the third drive-through build out.
Thank you. Mr. Grayson, you had a question or comment you wanted to add?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to concur with your remark that public participation is very important to this governing body. We'd like to hear from the public. We'd like to hear their opinions, both here, and I encourage you again, as Mayor did, to participate at the planning board as well. So my question for Mr. Phillips is a follow-up to the 3 drive-throughs. We had also talked about the requirement for outdoor seating at the drive-throughs, and you had made mention of the design that we put forward would sort of wouldn't preclude people from taking space at the drive-throughs, but it would sort of hint at what kind of tenants might want to be at those kind of places. Can you speak to the fact of, can you speak to the outdoor dining areas that we've discussed with the developer at the at all of the 3 drive-through restaurants?
Yeah, so we, again, as part of sort of promoting the issue of the public space and amenities, we were interested in basically, as part of those drive-throughs, providing space for outdoor dining, which we think, all else being equal, is a really good thing. And we've sort of strengthened the language in the redevelopment plan in that regard. And there is provision in the illustrative plan in order to do that. But ultimately, as you're well aware, Jeff, that these are items that you'll get a second bite at the apple as part of the site plan approval. So we think as we have the right balance here in terms of what's in the redevelopment plan to provide those safeguards, but allowing some flexibility, not only on the developer's part, but on behalf of the planning board at the time of the site plan review.
Okay, very good. I didn't mention that before when I made my remarks, that we had also pushed the developer to create additional outdoor spaces at each of the 3 drive-throughs in addition to the plazas. So again, people wouldn't be just encouraged to come there, sit inside, pick up their food and leave, but have additional places that they can sit and enjoy the outdoors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one other question. I'm not sure if you can answer it as part of this meeting or not, but I know I've heard questions from residents about what the ideas are for prospective tenants, and I know that was discussed in the informal meeting we had in August. So are you able to comment on that, Mr. Phillips, or perhaps not? I don't know.
Well, I know that in the meetings that we've had with the developer, he has indicated either likely or probable or prospective tenants. I think he has some letters of interest as he's represented, and I think he went through most of the buildings, but I don't want to be in a position to speak for him, and I'm also going to have to. The problem is I'm going to have to tap my memory, and I may get it wrong. But he all I can add is that the developer has clearly been in some serious negotiations with prospective users, and clearly he intends on going forward not only with the new site plan, but with constructing the project. He feels there's a sufficient tenant base, or he has sufficient assurances that he can do that. I will say that some of the uses were sort of health and wellness. Some were the instructional schools, which again have been added to the list of permitted uses. I think that also he had a sort of mid-range food market as a prospective tenant. But these things kind of can come and go. and we probably shouldn't get fixated on it other than that he's clearly been in some serious negotiations to move forward with tenants to get this project moving.
Are those prospective tenants, do they come up for mention at the site plan level, or the site plan is strictly for the buildings?
So what's likely to happen at the site plan stage, Mayor, is that he's going to likely have a better handle on his tenant base, and the tenants will know that he's serious going forward, basically, because a lot of the tenants basically want to see the site plan approval, and it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation in the retail marketplace. But he's going to have to actually spec his buildings in terms of the floor area, the location, and so forth. So I think what will happen is he'll have some pretty good indication of who his tenants are, and that will be reflected in the layout. And I think the planning board could certainly question him at that time, and I think he will be candid about who his tenants are. But as with many of these centers, there's probably going to be a number of the buildings where the space will be a placeholder. But, you know, I think nothing would make the developer happier than having, you know, close to a full tenant base to come forward with and represent to the planning board that this is, you know, this is going to be the center and here are going to be my tenants. But again, it's a little of the chicken and the egg, but he's far enough along that I think you'll have a pretty good sense and you'll get sort of an update at the time of site plan to what he's represented in the discussions that we had, which precipitated these plan amendments.
Yes, thank you.
Well,
Mr. Grayson.
thank you. I mean, if I could, we did have a public session with the developer, and he did mention on the record a couple of the tenants that
He did.
he thought
They could have changed.
they could have changed, but I think it's just fair for the record. I mean, some people had heard the names and some people haven't.
Right.
Just to throw out a couple, you know, Mr. Phillips just mentioned a food type of market. The name that was mentioned, again, it's not set in stone, was Lidl, which is a
L-I-D-Y, L-I-D-L.
L-I-D-L, which is like a European style Trader Joe's. Everybody likes Trader Joe's. So that's one that had been talked about as a food anchor. Yes, it's across from ShopRite, but this is a specialty kind of market like a Trader Joe's. So we think it would fit. And he talked about Orange Therapy, which is you can look up Orange Therapy. And next to the Orange Therapy would be a cryotherapy place adjacent to it. And
It's Orange Theory.
Orange Theory, sorry. And the other one is, I know a lot of people miss Panera that was in Morristown and got closed up by the mall closing there. And Panera is one of the tenants that's very strongly looking at placing themselves in this mall.
And a Jersey Mike's Sub.
And a Jersey Mike's Sub is the other one that was mentioned, yes. So those are just a couple. There's lots of stores there, but those are just some of the names that were thrown out just at a previous public hearing, so I feel comfortable mentioning them here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see anyone else from the public with their digital hand raised. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to offer any questions or comments? Okay, with that, can I have a motion to close the public comment?
So moved, Mayor.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, at this point in time, we will be voting. And would anyone like to offer any comments before voting?
Sure, I'll make
Mr. Grayson, go ahead.
Thank you. So just so the public is clear, as was mentioned earlier, this is a project that was approved back in 2017 with the redevelopment of the entire Colgate project. And it was split into, as we discussed, a residential portion and this commercial portion. And this governing body was basically given those plans. So what tonight is not the approval, just so everybody's clear, it's not the approval of putting a mall in. The approval of the mall was already given back in 2017. What we're talking about here are improvements to the prior plan and improvements that the Township Committee pushed for. Like I said before, improvements that the developer has been a partner with. But these are improvements that we're voting on to a prior plan that was previously approved in 2017. So we're not voting on whether there's going to be a mall there or not going to be a mall there. There is going to be a mall there because that's what was approved. We're voting on the changes to the prior redevelopment plan that, as I said, I think are great improvements from what was originally negotiated. Thank you.
I agree. I believe this is the amended plan before us this evening. I think it is a good step forward. I like the amendments and the changes, or the improvements that have been made to it. So is there anyone else? Anyone else who'd like to offer any comments? Okay, how do we do the vote on this? Does Mr. Carlson read anything?
Or would need a motion to
approve the ordinance?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance 19-20.
I'll second that.
I need a second.
Mr. Jordan, second.
Okay, thank you. So we do need a roll call on this. Yes, Madam Clerk, a roll call, please.
Mr. Arvanites.
Yes.
Mr. Jorfi.
Yes.
Mr. Mancuso. Mr. Mancuso.
He's muted.
He's muted. Mark, can you unmute him?
Mr. Mancuso.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Grizel.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor Wilson.
Yes. Ooh, I don't have Kathy Wilson, Mayor. Is that the one I'm supposed to read? Which I don't have. I declare this ordinance
Passed and finally accepted.
duly adopted and passed. And direct the clerk to file it in the proper location.
Very good.
Very good, Mayor.
That's from memory. Okay.
Thank you.
So ordinance 1920 is passed.
I guess I'm the
Thank you.
figurehead on this next one. 1720, ordinance 1720.
No,
For
Mr.
public
Thompson,
hearing
we
and-
have public comment next before.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have
Before the
public
ordinance.
comment and inquiry period. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, at this time, we're going to open the meeting for our first public comment. And for anyone who's joined us in the past recently, we are going to continue this 5-minute tradition that we've started in the last few weeks. So if you would like to comment beyond 5 minutes, we're going to ask that you do your 5-minute comment and then let other people speak, and we will come back to you for another 5-minute round during the public commentary that we're just about to enter. I hope that's clear. So with that, we're going to go to the first public commentary that's part of this meeting, and I see Mr. O'Reilly at the top of the list.
Mark, did you want to take the marketplace plan down from the screen?
Yeah.
There. So this is general comment, not on the marketplace, right?
Right, this is general comments now.
Jim O'Reilly, 50 Independence Way. Hypothetically, since the marketplace, the existence of it as a strip mall or whatever you want to call it, it's already been voted on. Hypothetically, when properties like this become free for development, is thought ever given? I suppose people do think of turning them into a park. That's the first question.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah, we didn't address that.
We did not address. Mr. Phillips, are you still here?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Graysow.
Would you like to?
No, well, go ahead.
Okay. So, Mr. O'Reilly, when things are proposed for development, they're usually owned by a private property owner who has the ability to develop the property or propose a development for the property as they please. The township, when smaller parcels become available, often try to go out and work with the owner of the property to possibly preserve that as open space. And we've done that numerous times across Morris Township. We have a lot of preserved space, and we're working on, for example, preserving the Valley View property on Piccadilly Road, which is, what was it, 10 acres?
Well, first, just 9 acres.
9 acres, so yeah, 9 acres. This parcel while it would be nice to preserve, it is open space. It is way too expensive for us to entertain this particular parcel. For us to retain something like that, it's worth a lot of money, and there's no way we could do something like that. Which is why we negotiated with the developer to actually preserve, or not preserve, but get in the plan some open spaces within the development. But I'd also like to point out, which was not clear from our presentation just now, is that people probably used to remember that there was a park at the corner of Hanover and Martin Luther King with a playing field. That park has been relocated to behind Menon Arena. So we did not lose a field. The field was just relocated behind Menon Arena, and there is that open space amenity also that's still back there, and there'll be walking paths to connect to it. So while we didn't preserve this, we felt like we did get some amenities for the public in terms of open space, with the field being shifted to back behind Menon. Do you think
that was good?
It'll be a regulation softball field, so it'll be actually what was already there.
Okay, so it'll be a regulation softball field. It'll be a true field. What was there before sort of looked like an open space with some soccer goals, but it was not a very well maintained, and it was very wet and muddy property as well. This will be a real field with amenities such as stands and such, and it'll be used as a playing field.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Reilly?
Well, yes, that's interesting. I guess it looks like there isn't much prospect for any major piece of land to become available. I appreciate you do what you can do within the constraints you're under. The other thing,
I'm sorry, if I could correct you, Mr. Riley. I mean, there are parcels that come up now and again in Morris Township. The large ones like this, like I said, are very hard to preserve, but there are smaller, 5, 7, 9 acre parcels that do come up and available where a homeowner moves or passes away, and we have an opportunity to go in and discuss. So there are opportunities that still come forth, and we do have a very nice open space fund that prior administrations put in place, and there's a hefty balance in it right now for us to use. So we're constantly on the lookout to preserve additional open space in Morris Township.
okay, last week, I think Mr. Our planner.
Mr. Phillips.
Yeah, Mr. Phillips. I can understand why he misunderstood my question because the wording was rather loose. But what he answered was whether, was it the hardware, is it Restoration Hardware? Is that the name of it at the?
Yes, Mr. O'Reilly, 1 minute.
Okay.
I'm sure you can't see the sign, I don't
He
believe.
seemed to think I had asked whether they're going out of, what happens when they go out of business. He sort of dismissed that. Although when you think of major corporations having gone out of business, it's not entirely improbable. But nevertheless, my question really was, the businesses that they want to put in there might fail on that spot. They might not generate the business that the Restoration Hardware thought they would generate, and they might decide to sell the property, or they might want to make another use of the property. And you said it's overlay development. Does that mean that if this owner abandons it, or if the businesses are no longer in business that are zoned that the redevelopment specified, that it goes back to the prior zoning? So what happens if?
Yeah, okay. Mr. Phillips is still on with us, and I think I neglected to say at the beginning of this, if we do have questions about the Abbey as part of this general public comment, we're going to collect all the questions and have Mr. Phillips answer them at the end.
No,
Okay.
part of the official.
Oh, I'm sorry,
We
okay.
should make it part of the official meeting.
That's right. Sorry about that. These questions will be answered as part of the official September 23rd meeting, which will be next week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
So we have Ms.
Mr. Caputo. I believe Mr. Caputo is next up.
56 Canfield Road, Remo Caputo, 56 Canfield Road.
Good evening, Mr. Caputo.
I have two comments. My second comment I'm going to bring first because of what your statement was just now is really very frustrating to the public and very inefficient in terms of getting an answer to a question. To have to wait a week or till the end of the meeting to get an answer, there can be no that cuts out any dialogue. If I have a question for Mr. Phillips, I'd like to have it answered now, not 2 hours from now or
What
next
is your
week.
question, Mr. Caputo?
Particularly if I have a question that may want to have a follow-up answer. Or if he, as in the case before, and as in my case, where Mr. Phillips has misinterpreted the question and then you cannot correct it. By way of example, last week I said it was bizarre that the council would approve a plan that allowed for parking across the street and for valets to cross the street 120 times during the night hours on a major highway. And he answered, well, it's not unusual to have parking across the street from a unit. That wasn't my question. I've seen parking across the street in many occasions.
I believe you raised these questions
but they were not answered. Okay, I want, the question that I have is, don't you think it's bizarre to have valet parking people walking across a major highway in the dark for 60 cars, that's 120 trips, and that was never addressed, okay? And that should be addressed, and then if it is addressed, I would like to have a follow-up question. And the format of saying, okay, we're going to collect all the questions right now, and then we're going to answer, 2 hours from now, that's unfair, and it's really not an acceptable format. That's nothing Mr. Phillips can do. He didn't put the format together. That's this council or this committee is putting together a format that is really not workable for the public to get the answers to the questions they want, and to be able to have a follow-up question or a dialogue with a professional. You had that presentation last week with the man from RH, the architect or what have you. He made all sorts of statements. You couldn't ask any questions. It is just not acceptable. But I'm beating a dead horse because no one's going to go there. The question that I have right now is, well, first, I would like Mr. Phillips to answer about having valets cross the street in the dark, and I don't believe they're going to be waiting for the light. But my question for tonight is, you've discussed several different changes to the plan for the 20, whatever the meeting is, the 23rd. Is there going to be an amended plan? Is it going to come out? Are we going to be able to see it, or or what is it you're going to vote on? I'd like to know the answer to that question now, not next week.
There is a plan in place. It's possible there may be some amendments prior to. If the amendments, they are not determined yet. If we do determine amendments and they're determined to be significant, then we reintroduce the plan and go through the process again. If any amendments we come up with are determined to be insignificant, and that determination is made by our attorney, then they're simply added to the plan.
Without anyone able to see them beforehand?
They will be announced, yes, but they will not be subject to further public comment, no.
Mr. Caputo, I think the possible amendments were discussed ad nauseum at the public hearing.
I understand that they were discussed, and that's fine, but are they going to be part of any document so that we can look at the document and say, oh yeah, that's in there?
At some point they will. At some point they will.
But after the vote, not before.
Okay, Mr. Caputo, you're asking the process, and I do feel comfortable explaining the process, okay? I think that is a legitimate question for us to answer here. We had 2 meetings so far, okay, on the Abbey, And during that time, we had many hours of public comment. The public comment portion of the public hearing is now concluded. And if we had not run out of time at the last meeting, we would have gone on to share some additional information. We're going to pick up on the 23rd where we left off. We have heard many suggestions. I myself am still in the process of reflecting on all the questions and concerns that we've heard. And something that's very important to me personally is thinking about what the options are for dealing with the various concerns that have been raised, traffic, parking, and site density being the most significant concerns that I've heard. And so to answer your question, we're still in the sort of deliberative stage. Each of us individually thinking about it. We are allowed to have one-on-one conversations with each other. Beyond that, we cannot talk more than with one other person at the same time. And on the 23rd, we will be sharing our reflections with the community and amending the plan as I described before. Either we don't have the list, whatever amendments may or may not be made. We do not have that compiled yet, but we will have that by the 23rd. There will be discussion among the Township Committee members and very likely a vote.
You're going to have an amended plan with the different changes, and there's not going to be any public comment with regard to those changes. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, like I said,
There's been a great deal of public comment already. We feel confident that we understand what the concerns are. The next step is what to do about them.
I understand that, but you're not providing a final document before you vote on it, and I think that there ought to be a final document before you vote on it.
I understood, Mr. Caputo. I understand that you wish to see the document before we vote on it, but that's not the way it's going to work. Sorry.
Well, I guess, all right. Well, I guess there'll be further discussions about that. I would like Mr. Phillips to answer the question that I asked.
You're going to have to, the 5 minutes is up.
I asked the question last week. I asked the question last week, and I asked it again today, and I would like Mr. Phillips to answer it.
Okay. Mr. Caputo, I suggest that you come back for a second 5 minutes. Okay?
No, it's not. No, it's not okay. It is.
Well, I'm sorry. That is what we're doing. Okay, next, you can come back for 5 minutes if you choose. Next up, we have Mr. Dingler. Mr. Dingler?
He's not unmuted yet.
Mr. Dingler, we show you with your digital hand up, but also muted. So we need you to unmute at your end.
Is that better now?
Yes, sir.
We can hear you now.
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry to be fumbling around. Thanks, Mayor. And of course, my interest lies in making a comment with regard to the Abbey as well. And I would agree with Mr. Caputo about the format that's been used here has been overbearing in terms of the outcome for the participants. It's not user friendly. It's not sort of in the direction of the traditional review and question dialogue that I would have expected from a process like this. My comment, and I guess my question here would be, we still feel that the project doesn't afford adequate protections to the single-family homes that are adjacent to the Abbey, and we feel like the Crescent Drive properties are bearing more than their fair share of the burden of this project. I would respectfully request that, as was so eloquently stated by Judge Harper and Remo in the past, and I mentioned it as well, that the committee would consider sending the redevelopment plan to the planning board before they vote, specifically so that material and significant thorny questions could be hopefully resolved in a more efficient way. Some of those thorny questions relate to inadequate setbacks, massive parking lots, potential relocation of parking. I personally think there's been 3 narratives with regard to relocating the parking. First, it was denied because of historical significance in some way. And I don't think the Historical Society that chimed in backed that statement up. So the next narrative was, and I'm talking about moving parking from the Crescent Drive side over to the Canfield-Madison side. The second narrative was that there was something called a front yard. That front yard wasn't identified, it wasn't defined, it wasn't measured. Paul Phillips threw out the concept of a front yard. We're in Morris Township, and people don't park in the front yard in Morris Township. That's not much information to go on. I can say that right down the street at the MetLife building, there's plenty of parking in front of the building. And so the last narrative that was used to justify the parking over in the Crescent Drive side was that, well, it was the process of elimination. So that's where we had to put it. And I think that's the most unsatisfying of the 3 purported narratives, because that means that there's an undesirable situation. We don't know where to put it. So let's lay it on the Crescent Drive residents. And I don't think that's appropriate. Again, I think these are very thorny questions. I think they need to be thought through and discussed carefully. And I would respectfully request that the redevelopment plan be taken back to the planning board before a town council vote.
Thank you, Mr. Dietmar. So I have a few comments in response. The redevelopment plan before us, the next step is for a vote by us. The planning board has already looked at it and approved it as consistent with our master plan. So the planning board has already reviewed this. Your mention of Judge Harper's comments, I agree with. And part of what stood out to me from Judge Harper was his emphasis on people's interests. You know, what are the underlying interests that people have? And I do feel that from many hours of public comment, we have a very good actually idea of what people's interests are. And we are grappling now with what are the options for meeting those interests. And of course, parking is one of the biggest, most important considerations we're looking at. And I'm not 100% positive that, I'm not sure if you picked up from our meeting on September 3rd, that there was discussion of moving the setback from Crescent Road, from the property line of Crescent Road to 20 feet from 15 feet. And one thing that I personally wanted to bring up at the last meeting before we ran out of time is I wanted to ask for the diagrams and pictures of the buffers that RH is able to offer to be shared with the public. For me, that was an important piece of information that I had not seen before the last meeting. And I'm pretty sure that there are many members of the public who have not seen that. So I'm going to ask for that to be shown at next week's meeting as one part of the options that I'm looking at for dealing with parking. So let me think here. And your comment about thinking about the questions and concerns we've heard, reflecting deeply and carefully, we are doing that, I assure you.
Here,
Mr. Grayson.
thank you. Sorry, I have to turn my microphone on. Mr. Dingler, and it also goes to Mr. Caputo too. Like the Mayor just said, we are reflecting very deeply on this. We understand the concerns of residents. And just so you should know, understand the process based on the meetings that we had, is that this is going to be going back to the planning board for site plan approval. And the planning board are the ones that are going to give final okay to a parking plan. So we're not giving a final okay with this redevelopment plan. We're sort of setting out metes and bounds, but the planning board are going to be making the final determination on adequate parking, circulation, traffic, things like that. And if there's a reconfiguration of parking that's required, that could be done at the planning board level. But those are site plan issues, and we're really just looking at a broader overview of the layout of the site, and the specifics are going to be dealt with at the site plan at the planning board. So you will have an opportunity again to come back, just as we stated before. We encourage every member of the public to participate in our meetings, and we look forward to your additional comments at the planning board level that can be considered by that body.
Thanks, Mr. Grazel. Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate the thoughtful comments. I am concerned that when I do participate at the planning board hearings later on, that if I bring up this issue about relocating the parking, potentially relocating the parking and asking questions and hoping for some thoughtful consideration, I'm just worried that I'm going to be told that that's either a material or a significant level change, and that can't be changed at this level. That would have had to have been changed before the plan was voted on. I don't want to have that result.
Okay. And just to be clear, you're raising a question, and what you would prefer is, I'm just trying to clarify what you're pushing for.
Sure.
You're pushing for the
Sure. There's a parking lot for 60 cars located adjacent to the Crescent Drive neighbors, and we have a big concern about that parking lot, and we think that at least a portion of that capacity could be moved to the location up towards the corner of Canfield and Madison Avenue. There's some space up there where the setbacks are 40 feet or so, and we feel like that, at least half of that parking could be relocated to that area. And if some appropriate hedges were needed to dampen the view of cars in that location, I just think that that would help ameliorate the concerns of the Crescent Drive residents.
Just a point of information for me. Have you had an opportunity to look at the buffers that I referenced? Have you seen those?
I have, Mayor, and not to belittle your interest there at all, but I do feel like the buffers are cosmetic in nature, and they're at best a Band-Aid to put over a bad situation that's been created. And I'd rather think about what we can do to address some of the root causes, such as the intensity of the operation, such as so much parking being located over on the Crescent Drive side, simply because that was the process of elimination. These are root causes, as opposed to as opposed to cosmetic buffers.
I understand. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you had seen those, which would include both the shrubs and the trees and the wall. You've seen all of those, correct?
I have.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Grayzel, go ahead.
Thank you. So Mayor Wilson is the figurehead here and running the meeting at the Township Committee level, but we have a chairman of the planning board who's going to be running the process at the planning board level. And while the governing body is going to approve this plan here, as I said before, the planning board is going to approve the site level plan. And as I stated at the last public hearing on the ADV, Mayor Wilson and I both sit on the planning board as well. And we are going to be taking all our learnings and all of the testimony from residents that we've taken in here at the Township Committee level and bring it to the planning board to ensure that the planning board understands what we've been through already, what we've heard already, and the types of things that you're looking for like we just discussed. So again, those are site plan issues that you're asking about that will be taken care of at the planning board level. And you have my promise, I'm sure you have Mayor Wilson's promise that we're going to fight for our residents to get those barriers and get as much protection for you as we possibly can.
But just to be clear, Mr. Grayzel, so we're clear in what we're saying here, the buffers would be a decision at the site plan level.
Correct.
Relocating the parking to the front lawn would not be a site plan level decision. I do not believe.
I think the planning board could, I think the planning board can, you're shaking your head no, I don't know, Mr. Carlson could possibly weigh in if they feel like parking needed to be accommodated somewhere else.
Yeah, thank you. I think that kind of a change to the plan would require a move to first reading if we were going to relocate parking from the rear yard to the front yard. I don't think we could do that at the planning board.
So it would have to be at the redevelopment plan level. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's correct.
Okay, or it could be added as an amendment to the existing plan and then reintroduced. That's another option.
I don't struggle with de minimis changes to the plan are fine and don't require us to go back to first reading. A five foot difference on a buffer, that's fine. We can do that. But if we're going to completely relocate parking from the back to the front, that would require going back to first reading.
We're not talking about complete.
Yes, that's what Mr. Dingler was talking about.
I thought he was talking about shifting a little bit, but we're getting into specifics.
Okay.
We shouldn't be discussing that here. We should be discussing that at the hearing.
I'm trying to clarify the process questions.
Okay.
Sure, just to clarify, I'm looking for a transition of all or part of the parking in that 60-car parking lot.
Okay.
Right behind my
Mr.
back.
Dingler, we're out of time for you. I invite you to come back for a second 5 minutes. Yes, we do have other people, and I encourage you, if you have more, to come back.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. O'Reilly? Wait, we're getting people who haven't spoken.
Okay, go
Mr.
ahead.
McKenna has not spoken yet.
Who has it?
Frank McKenna.
Oh, down below here. Okay, here it is.
Mr. McKenna,
He's coming up.
Good evening. Can you hear
good
me?
evening. Please say your name and address for the record.
Frank McKenna, 48 Crescent Drive. I just
Thank
want
you.
to send my concurrence and agreement with both Mr. Caputo and Mr. Dingler on all their points, particularly the process and the format. I remember vividly 3 weeks ago tonight, Judge Harper made the plea, said it very well. I remember there was a lot of affirmative nodding of heads and agreement to his plea of someone organizing a sit down of some sort, a gathering of some sort, a negotiation of some sort between RH and the Crescent Drive most impacted neighbors. A week went by, 2 weeks from tomorrow night, I was in the room and I brought that up again, and you, Mayor, and some of the board nodded their head in agreement as I stated again what Judge Harper said. And again, a very affirmative reaction from you and the board that, yes, right on, that sounded like a good thought and idea from Judge Harper. 2 weeks later, and basically 3 weeks from the point of time that that was openly discussed, I'm no expert, but it sure sounds to me like all of this time has gone by and not anyone in a leadership role has thought to heed those words and figure a way ahead of this vote next week to sit down together. I know we've spent hours, as you said, Mayor, with open discussion, and you have reflected for the last 3 weeks all of the public commentary, as has the TC. I get it, but where is the conversation that we have desired and Judge Harper so eloquently stated 3 weeks ago? Basically, what I think we're hearing tonight is you're all reflecting, you're all absorbing, you're all going to re-listen and reread and bring it all to the forefront. And it's great to hear the deputy mayor said, we're on your side, guys. Don't worry. We'll make sure we take care of our residents. But 2 minutes ago, I hear that, well, we can't really do that at the planning board. So if we have not felt any feeling of, let's try and be a leader here and let's try and bring both sides together and not just wait for this to figure itself out without any sort of sit down, open forum, Zoom, backyard, whatever it would take. I'm astounded that this is how this process has gone.
Mr. McKenna, I could not agree with you more. I strongly encourage the residents along Crescent to meet with representatives of RH. It's my understanding that RH is very willing and eager to do that. And I've been asking, how do we facilitate that? I'm not sure what my involvement in that process would be, but I will state publicly on the record that I strongly encourage the residents of the immediate residents, especially that back up, border on the Abbey property, to be in touch with RH. I am happy to have RH pick up the phone and call you tomorrow. If that nothing would make me happier. And it's my understanding that RH is interested in doing that. And I would leave it to you to figure out the format. Do you want to have private conversations? Do you want to get together as a group? Do you want to do it by Zoom? Do you want to get at someone's house? Any of those things. If you would like, if you would like me to be involved, I would. But to me, it's a conversation between the residents and RH that I strongly encourage. And the question that occurs to me is how to, what are the logistics for making that happen?
So as Mr. Dingler put it so eloquently, the sort of the burden falls once again onto the residents.
I'm sorry, Mr. McKenna, I missed what you said. Could you start over?
As Mr. Dingler so wonderfully put it prior, it sounds like yet again the burden of this undertaking falls back onto those most impacted neighbors of this process.
McKenna, would you like me to set up the meeting? I'd be happy to do so. If you recall, Mr. Stanchak from RH shared with the public his cell phone number and his email. And if you would like me to arrange that meeting, I will be happy to do so.
It just seems that, I guess, if this wasn't voiced right now with a week to go before the vote, I wonder if now this offer would have come about. That's all. I guess I'm just perplexed.
Mr. McKenna, I am a little frustrated by this because what you're saying is exactly what I've been wanting for.
Well, then forgive me, Mayor Wilson, forgive me. If this is what you want and you are a person in a leadership role for the town representing all of the residents, forgive me, but we as residents look to our governing body to help us in this situation.
I will help you organize the meeting. I ask that you give me a call tomorrow morning, and between you and me and Mr. Dingler and Mr. Caputo, we will make arrangements to have a conversation with Mr. Stanchek.
I think Mr. Dingler and Mr. Caputo will welcome that most fervently.
And we can invite Judge Harper too.
Well, again, I think all of this should have been being in the process.
Noted. I apologize for not doing it soon enough, but I'm doing it now. And I 100% agree with you that this is an important conversation to have. So we are now going to arrange it, and it's going to occur before next Wednesday. And I will be happy to participate in it.
Well, I would definitely defer to certainly Mr. Dingler, the McGinleys, Carl Sikora, any and all of those immediate impacted neighbors, Mr. Caputo, Judge Harper. So I would certainly defer, and I'm sure they'll be looking forward to hearing from you, Mayor.
Mr. McKenna, I do not have your phone number. I do believe I do have Mr. Dingler's. How about if I give Mr. Dingler a call tomorrow morning and we'll go from there?
I think that would be welcomed by him and the rest of the neighbors. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Do we have anyone who hasn't had an opportunity yet? Okay, Mr. Caputo. Mr. Caputo, you're muted, I believe, at your end.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hopefully this will be short. I heard what Mr. Grizel had to say, and I would suggest, and this would be something that Mr. Phillips and Mr. Carlson would have to agree is possible. I think it is, and that is simply to amend the plan to specifically specify that the planning board shall have the authority to address the access points, the parking, the density, setbacks. They could all be modified by the planning board. If that could be put into the plan, then we can just do that, and we can argue about it at the planning board. And because now the planning board would have the authority under the ordinance to make those modifications. Now, I would ask Mr. Carlson if he thinks that would be something that would be possible to do, and Mr. Phillips to see whether or not he thinks that is a reasonable thing to do. And that would resolve all the issues. We can just go on.
I'm sorry. Say again, Mr. Caputo.
All right. Who asked that?
That was sorry. Mr. Carlson.
Mr. Carl. The question, what I am saying is that we would make a modification to the ordinance that says that the issues of the number of parking spaces, the location of parking spaces, the number and location of access, the density of the project are items that the planning board would have the jurisdiction to modify, and if that, including the setbacks, and if those issues could be addressed by the planning board, then we can put that in the ordinance and we can go and argue at the planning board. But I believe, and I've looked at the ordinance, I've looked at the law a bunch of times. An ordinance is an ordinance. If you put a 25-foot setback and you want to do, and the board asks for 30, the applicant says, the ordinance says 25, I only have to do 25. You're passing an ordinance. However, if the ordinance says that the planning board has jurisdiction to modify certain items, such as the number of parking, the access, the setbacks, and the density, then they have the authority to do that.
And I appreciate your comment, Mr. Caputo. I'm going to defer to the board planner on most of those issues for my answers. So.
Is Mr. Phillips still here?
No.
Okay, he's not here. The one thing I will say,
Mr. Carlson, I think, could answer that.
No. I'm not. I've not looked at the required parking, the required access, nearly as closely as our planner has.
Well, I'm not asking you to modify it. I'm asking you to give the planning board the authority to modify them.
Right, but I'm not sure if that's needed.
Well, I can guarantee you it's needed
Well,
because that's what we're all arguing.
I'm glad you can, but
may I make a comment? May I interject something in here? The way I understand the way the redevelopment plan works is that for example, setbacks, that's established in the redevelopment plan.
That's correct.
That then goes to the planning board, and as part of the site plan, they can look at that. Now, let's say hypothetically that the planning board did want to recommend a change to the setback. The way that procedure would work is that they would recommend that to the Township Committee, and any amendments to the plan need to be made by the Township Committee. So that's the way the process works, as I've heard Mr. Phillips explain it in the past.
I don't think that that's right. What's going to happen is that the planning board, and let's just use the setbacks, the planning board says, we don't want 15 feet or 10 feet or whatever it is, we want 30 feet. And the applicant's going to say, well, I have an ordinance here that says my setback is 15 feet or 20 feet. And if the planning board denies it because of the setback, it doesn't go back to the council. It goes back to the court. It goes on appeal.
Yes, they could.
It goes on appeal to the court for arbitrary and capricious. Okay.
And hold on, Remo. Mr. Caputo is correct to that effect that the setbacks that are set by the ordinance are the setbacks that need to be honored by the planning board. He's correct, but he's asking the board to go way beyond here to give wild other jurisdiction to the planning board.
Well, I was just taking what Mr. Grazel said. He says we're going to do all these things at the planning board, and I've always taken the position, well, you can't do it at the planning board. It has to be done now. And Mr. Grazel said, oh, we can do it at the planning board. I said, well, fine, let's do it at the planning board. Give them the authority to do it, and we'll do it at the planning board.
Just to be clear, what we discussed there was the buffers that we were talking about. Those decisions, buffer decisions, can be made at the planning board, whereas the decision about the location, moving the location of the parking, for example, from Crescent to the front lawn, that is a decision that would have to be made at the redevelopment plan level. So depending what topic you're talking about, certain things are, as you know, decided at the site plan level. Other things are decided at the redevelopment plan level.
I understand.
Location of the parking is part of the redevelopment plan, not a site plan decision.
I understand all of that perfectly. I've been doing this for 40 years. My problem is that it doesn't appear that the board understands it, and that's where I'm getting frustrated, because buffer and setback are two different things. You can argue about the buffer, but you can't argue about the setback.
And we all get that, Mr. Caputo.
Okay. Well, Mr. Grazel wasn't quite sure about that because he said, "Well, we'll talk about it at the planning board." I know that you can't.
I'm sure Mr. Grazel means that we will talk about the buffer at the planning board.
Well, buffer,
I mean, the setback is set by ordinance, but the
understand
buffer
that, and I'm hoping that
quality of the buffer is. Excuse me, Mr. Caputo. The quality of the buffer will be discussed at the planning board.
But we're not concerned about the quality of the buffer as much as we are concerned about the setback. All right, and that's what
and the
Mr.
setback
Dingler
is proposed at 25 feet.
20.
I'm sorry, 20 feet. Right.
Okay.
And that's what's before everyone tonight.
I was just taking Mr. Grazel's statement that we can discuss all these issues at the planning board. I know that you can't. And I wanted to make sure that the board, that this council, that this committee understands that once you pass this ordinance and you put a setback in and you put the parking in and you put whatever other items, these access points in, they are in stone. And that has been, every time I've said that, somebody, oh, that's not true. It's going to go to the planning board. Well, the planning board's going to get it, and they will be able to decide whether you put petunias or daisies in the buffer, but they're not going to move that buffer 1 inch.
And I assure you, Mr. Caputo, that the board understands that we are talking about a 20-foot setback, but a buffer that can be negotiated. Whether it's a wall or trees or, as you said, petunias, that is up for negotiation, between now and the site plan level.
Right. But the issue,
the board is very clear that they're voting on a 20-foot setback with a negotiable buffer.
Okay, we need to wrap this 5-minute session up. Do you want to, I do believe we understand your concern, Mr. Caputo. There's certainly access, parking, setbacks, and density. You're asking us to move that to be a planning board decision. And the answer you're getting is that those are not planning board decisions. They are
particularly, well, no, if you make it a planning board decision, particularly with regard to Mr. Dingler's position about moving the parking, that's an excellent thing that ought to be discussed. And if you don't have time to discuss it, then you ought to give the planning board the authority to discuss it.
Or rather, this committee can decide that the parking should be where it is or elsewhere. Well,
that's fine. If you want to do that, that's good. That's fine. But it needs to be discussed and and looked at. And there is no dialogue. There is no dialogue.
There will be dialogue, Mr. Caputo. We will be inviting you to the conversation that we just discussed.
That's fine. I'll be happy to go.
Okay, great. Okay, if you wish to speak again, we have our second public comment at the end of the meeting. So
I think we're done.
Okay, we will be in touch.
Thank you. I'll be waiting to hear from you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McKenna, do we have anyone else who hasn't spoken for one time?
No.
Okay, Mr. McKenna.
I did not raise my hand on purpose. If I did by accident, I apologize.
By accident?
I didn't think I did, but sorry if I did.
Yeah, it's raised.
Well, I will lower it.
Okay.
All right.
Is there anyone else? This is last call for anyone from the public who would like to comment or ask any questions.
Mayor, seeing none, I move that we close the public commentary.
Thank you. Second? Is there a second?
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. And Mayor, if I could, now that the public commentary is closed, may I speak?
Sure.
1 second. Just for clarity of the record, I think Mr. Caputo took my words out of context. What I had said or what I had meant to say was that the planning board will look at the sufficiency of the parking, the sufficiency of the circulation, access points, and such. So those site plan level issues are what's going to be discussed at the site plan hearings at the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grayson. Moving on, we have ordinances for introduction, 1720. Mr. Carlson.
Apologies, let me move from my Zoom to my agenda again.
I'm sorry, 1720 and 1820 are second read, public hearing, and final consideration.
Right, so these are also ordinances that are on for public hearing and final consideration. We've got an ordinance vacating the rights of the Township of Morris in and to a certain 20-foot wide pedestrian right-of-way existing between 26 and 28 Stonehenge Road, otherwise known as Block 2201, Lot 13 and 14. This ordinance will be continued to the... I don't think this ordinance will be continued to the November meeting. Is that what we're doing?
No, sir. One of the property owners is decided to move. And so the two property owners have requested that this be carried to another meeting.
I apologize. This was yes, you did tell me this. So this will be continued to the November meeting of the Township Committee. I think we're looking for a motion to carry this ordinance 1720 to the November meeting of the Township Committee.
Right, that would be November 12th.
Thank you.
That we move ordinance 17-20 to November 12th, and I assume, Mr. Carlson, that no additional public notice is required?
That's correct, sir.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Voice vote or roll call?
Roll call, please.
Madam Clerk, we have a roll call, please?
Yes.
This vote is to move it to November 17-20.
Mr. Arvanites,
Yes.
Mr. Jorfi,
Yes.
Mr. Mancuso,
Yes.
Mr. Grizel,
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Next, we have ordinance 18 I'm sorry. So that, do you want to make an announcement, Mayor?
No, go ahead. This is second reading.
I'll announce that
20.
an ordinance 17-20 is carried to the November regularly scheduled meeting of the Township Committee without further notice. Next, we have ordinance 18-20, an ordinance vacating the rights of the Township of Morris in and to a certain sewer easement existing on 12 Aspen Way, also known as Block 6003, Lot 13.
At this point, if there's anyone from the public who has any questions or comments? Oh, sorry, okay, Mr. Grizel, you want to move it?
Yes, I'll move 18-20.
Thank you. Second?
Mr. Mancuso.
Mr. Mancuso seconded?
Second, yes.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who would care to ask any questions or make any comments? Seeing none, we will close the public comment and proceed with the vote. Madam Clerk, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Arvanites. Mr. Arvanites?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Jorfi?
Yes.
Mr. Mancuso?
Yes.
Mr. Grizel?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes. I, Kathy Wilson, Mayor, declare the ordinance passed and adopted, and that I declare that the clerk record it in the proper place. So I do not have the text for this evening. Okay, next we have introduction of ordinance 2020. Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Wilson. Ordinance 2020, which is probably doomed based on its numbering. 2020 is an ordinance amending Chapter 95 entitled Zoning and Chapter 57 entitled Land Development of the Code of the Township of Morris.
Okay, thank you. This is our introduction of this ordinance. We call this our Houses of Worship Ordinance. Just a little background on that. This has been vetted by the planning board. There was a subcommittee on the planning board that worked on this. The point here was basically to sort of clean up the language in our code. There were various ambiguities and inconsistencies regarding houses of worship, places of assembly, and schools. And the subcommittee met several times. The ordinance before you, you can see the strikeout feature, which deletes the existing text that's in our code. And then the additional language is in there, underlined. And I participated in this subcommittee, as did Mr. Grizel, and I think it's very well done. So that is my comment for introduction. Did you have anything else to add?
No, I think you summarized it very well. I think it clarifies what our ordinance, our land use ordinance should be on this matter. Mr. Phillips and the subcommittee did a great job. I agree with your comments.
Thank you.
And I encourage the public to look it up on the website if you do want to read it. It's posted on the website. Take a read, and we'll have a second reading at our October meeting.
Yes, we will. So with that, is there any other question or comment from any of the committee members? As a first read, we do not have public hearing on this, but we've introduced it, and we do take a roll call vote, correct? Okay. Madam Clerk, could you please do a roll call?
Yes. Mr. Arvanites?
Yes.
Mr. Jorfi?
Yes.
Mr. Mancuso?
Yes.
Mr. Grizel?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Okay, we will do our second read and public hearing on that at our October meeting. Next, we have our resolutions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have resolutions numbered 176-20 through 186-20, and we have a late starter tonight being resolution -188-20, being a resolution denying FMBA grievance 20-01 at step 3 by the Township Committee.
If I could clarify the record, it's 176 through 187, and we added 188. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I might be looking at an old agenda, so I might be missing 187.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, I assume that Mr. Jorfy will want 188 removed from the agenda, correct?
Mr. Jarvie, you'll be abstaining on 188. Okay.
Yeah, so I will move 176 through 187, Mayor.
Thank you. Second? Okay, we need a roll call, please, Madam Mayor, for resolutions 176 through 187-20.
Thank you. Mr. Arvanites.
Yes.
Mr. Jarfie.
Yes.
Mr. Mancuso.
Yes.
Mr. Brazel.
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes. I do have one quick question on 186-20. Mr. Quinn, if you could just comment briefly on that. Engineering services, Kennedy Road, Gregory Avenue, and Pine Tree Lane.
Yes, so yes, ma'am, I apologize. That is our next road that's lined up for a full reconstruction. This is to do the survey work for that Kennedy Road, Gregory, and Pine Tree to get it in the queue for a reconstruction in the coming years, most likely in 2021, if not 2022, but to get all the survey work done for that reconstruction project.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm glad to hear that's moving forward. Okay, now we need to vote on 188-20. Madam Clerk, a roll call, please.
I'll offer that.
And I'll second that.
Thank you.
Mr.
Roll call,
Arvanites.
please, Madam Clerk.
Yes.
Mr. Arvanites.
Yes.
Mr. Jarfie.
I'll abstain.
Mr. Mancuso.
Yes.
Mr. Brazel.
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. General business correspondence as circulated. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Oh, I keep forgetting to move it. Go ahead.
I'll move that, Mayor.
And a second? I need a second.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And then we have receipt for the record. We don't vote on that. That's just information, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have standing committee reports and commentary by Township Committee. Mr. Arvanites.
I don't have anything to report today.
Thank you. Mr. Jorfy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll have a few brief reports for my committees before I go into general commentary. One for the Communications Standing Committee. We are working to finalize our fall newsletter, which will be being mailed out to residents. We'll have a letter from the Township Committee providing an update along with some of the updated recycling guidelines that we put out last year as a reminder for residents, as well as information on our upcoming plastic bag ordinance that will take effect at the beginning of October. Next, for the Legislation Standing Committee, I'll be meeting with Administrator Quinn on Friday to discuss upcoming ordinances. Specifically, which I've discussed last month, was introducing an electric vehicle ordinance, I should say electric vehicle charging ordinance for proposed development projects down the road, along with a bamboo ordinance, which I discussed in length last month. So I'll hopefully have an update and potentially an introduction of these ordinances in the coming months. And lastly, for the Infrastructure Standing Committee, I just wanted to thank Administrator Quinn's staff for working on a grant for an electric vehicle charging station at the Cornine Field Streeter Pool complex, which would be a great addition to our amenities there. I'm looking forward to hopefully having some more infrastructure upgrades like that throughout the township down the road. For my committee commentary, I've talked about it before, but I just wanted to again thank all the work from our staff and my colleagues on the committee in working with the developer on the marketplace, taking what was an already existing plan and being able to reopen the books to add amenities for residents, I think is a big win for our town. And the precedent we're setting, I think, is what we're going to have for future developments down the road. I appreciate the efforts to increase the focus onto pedestrian amenities over more blacktop and concrete. The electric vehicle charging stations, the pocket park plazas, the phasing in particular, I think is very important. And I think it'll add a big value to residents down the road. And then again, thank you, Mayor Wilson, for bringing these changes up to the residents during a Zoom meeting last month and seeking their input as well. I think it was a great step forward. One thing I did want to note, which we'll be announcing soon, plug for my fire company, Hillside, is planning to do a food drive for the Interfaith Food Pantry in October. Those who know Hillside Hose, we normally have our Oktoberfest every fall. We will not be having that this year. And in turn, since we're unable to have that event because of COVID, we are going to give back to the community through a food drive. So details will follow, and I hope folks in the township who are looking to give and contribute to the community would be able to take part in that. And then lastly, when I was at the firehouse this weekend, one of our former firefighters and FMBA members and inspector, Mike Ryer, stopped by and showed me his book on the history of Woodland Avenue Fire Company. I got a copy of it, and I just want to acknowledge all the hard work that retired firefighter Mike Ryer put into talking about and writing this very dense book on the history of Woodland Hook and Ladder Company. And I'm looking forward to going through it and encouraging him to do so, something similar for the Township Fire Department as a whole. I think it's great. We need to preserve our history as best as we can before we lose it. And I know Mike is excited to get to work working on preserving the history for the other 4 fire companies in the township. So,
when did you get the book?
What's that?
When did you get that?
Sunday. He stopped by the firehouse while I was there.
Oh my gosh. I know. I told him to reserve a copy for me too, so hopefully I'll get it soon. It's very exciting that he did that. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I just note, it's over 350 pages, and this is a big book.
We got a lot of history.
And that's for one fire company.
Really? Wow.
Wow.
That's incredible. What an accomplishment. Thank you. And thank you for all your comments. Mr. Mancuso?
Thank you, ma'am. I have 2 items I'd like to speak about. Number one is on September 11th, when the World Trade Center both came down, all of us who worked at the New York Stock Exchange, which I did for 38 years, went back to work on the 17th. It was surreal because we wore masks then too, but the aroma, the smell of decay, of asbestos, of whatever it was in the air was just beyond anybody's recognition. And from what I've heard, many of my compatriots at the exchange have come down with some really negative illnesses, and I feel very badly for them. I feel so strongly about the first responders, the people who went into that building and didn't come out. So I have a real special part in my heart because I spent all of that time down there, and I just, remember them almost every day when I speak to them on Facebook. Secondly, the coming election, ballots will be mailed to every registered voter. To register, if you're not registered, you must register by October 13th. The ballots will be mailed to you. Don't request a ballot, an absentee ballot, because if you do, you will be put on the list for all eternity, so it speaks. There are only 13 sites in Morris County that have been designated as a place to put a drop box before Election Day. And unfortunately, Morris Township was not one of them. I spoke to Ms. Grassi, the clerk, this morning, and she said, well, it wasn't within her purview, it was the Board of Elections. I spoke to a member of the Board of Elections about 4 or 5 hours ago who indicated that their choices were very, very limited. There's one at the Madison Town Hall, there's one in Morristown, but we did not get one. And I was pretty surprised, since Morris Township is the second largest town in all of Morris County, why we didn't have a chance. So I asked this person if they would look into it more clearly and carefully and see if we could be designated as a site. The only other piece of information is, if you fill your ballot out and don't mail it, you can bring it to a drop box on Election Day. Now, I know there will be one in Morris Township, and I think it'll be at Town Hall, but I'll fill you in on that as I get more information. But I just think it's sort of a shame that we are the second largest town in all of Morris County, and we were not chosen as one of the 13. Thank you, ma'am. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mancuso. I actually checked on that myself yesterday, and we are not in the 15 locations, but I did check on this as well, and on Election Day, if anyone wants to come to the municipal center and drop off their vote by mail ballot in person, I'm told that will be, you will be able to do that on Election Day, which is a change from the primary. So I got that, and you have to call the clerk and the Board of Elections, and but you're right, there's many concerns here, and I appreciate your advocacy for us to have a location. I agree with you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Grayson.
Thank you, Mayor. For my committee reports, those of you who listen to me at our committee meetings monthly know that I like to highlight the good work of our police department, and I will do so again. On Friday, September 4th, 2020, Chief Mark DiCarlo presented Patrolman James Lezak with 2 life-saving awards. The first life-saving award was for actions taken while off duty, where Patrolman Lezak observed a male about to jump off a bridge over the Passaic River in an attempt to commit suicide. Patrolman Lezak grabbed the male and pulled him from the bridge to prevent him from jumping. The second life-saving award was while on duty, and again was for a male that had attempted to commit suicide, being self-inflicted major injuries, in which he and other officers provided enhanced medical services. Their quick and well-trained actions led to the male surviving this near fatal wounds. And I'd like to quote Police Chief Mark DiCarlo, who stated, "As an agency, we pride ourselves on the abilities of all our officers to show the utmost professionalism and care to all people we come in contact with, whatever it is the emergency or medical care, whether it is emergency medical care that is life-saving, or if it is motor vehicle crashes and everything in between." Patrolman Lezak is a great example of our core mission and values as an organization. It should be noted that Patrolman Lezak has now received 3 life-saving awards during his 2.5 years with our agency. So I'd like to congratulate Patrolman Lezak on his actions, and it is indicative of the good work of our police department. On the sewer front, we had a discussion of the multiple agreements that we have in place with surrounding communities, Morristown, Morris Plains, Randolph, Hanover, Harding, and Florham Park. We have exchange agreements with each of these municipalities. Sometimes we take their flow. In certain cases, we give them flow if they're downhill from us. So we send some of our sewage to Morristown sewer plant and some to our Hanover sewer plant, and we are receiving from many municipalities too. We're going to be working on language in those agreements so that they conform with each other. They were done separately and some of them are old, so that's some work we're doing on the sewer front. As for the joint municipal court, I previously notified everyone that our judge has announced his retirement at the end of this year. The joint court has received 12 resumes from those interested, and as chairman of the joint court this year, which I am honored to be doing, I am leading the vetting process on hiring the new judge, and we are going to, as a group, be interviewing a couple of candidates next week. For my general comments, last month the Township Committee wrote a letter to the New Jersey BPU about the power outages we had in the aftermath of the tropical storm. Other towns complained directly to JCP&L, but this body thought it best to lodge our complaint with the governmental agency that regulates the utilities in the state of New Jersey. We wanted to let the public know that we have yet to receive a response from BPU, and I want to encourage our Township Committee to send them a follow-up letter, as I've discussed with some of you, and I hope we can move forward with that. The Morris County American Legion, in partnership with the All Veterans Alliance, will be conducting its 3rd annual POW-MIA, Prisoner of War Missing in Action, 24-hour vigil at the Veterans Memorial located in Turkey Brook Park in Bud Lake. Ceremonies start at 4 p.m. This Friday, September 18th. During the vigil, they are going to read the names of all New Jersey veterans from all wars that are still unaccounted for after all these years, while maintaining a memorial fire and ringing the Ascension Bell 21 times every hour on the hour. And for more information, if you'd like to participate, please see the Legion's website at www.legionmorriscountynj.org. That's all strung together, legionmorriscountynj.org. I speak every month about the public remaining vigilant in their health protections against COVID. I hope everybody's wearing a mask. This month, I would like to encourage everybody to get a flu shot. So you might have heard something called the twindemic, where we're going to have the flu season overlapping with COVID-19. If you get your flu shot, you can reduce your risk of being possibly misdiagnosed with COVID, or your self-diagnosis of being tested, coming down with COVID. Anyway, I encourage everybody to get a flu shot so that they can avoid the flu, and it will reduce public health issues throughout the fall and winter. I want to thank Mayor Wilson for organizing the discussion next week on suicide awareness. She mentioned it before, and she'll probably mention it again. But I know that you have personally worked very hard on this effort, and I wanted to laud all your work to do this, to bring awareness to this really, really important issue. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
And lastly, this weekend is the Jewish New Year holiday of Rosh Hashanah. I would like to wish all of our Jewish residents Shana Tova, which are the Hebrew words for a Happy New Year. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Grayson. My standing committee reports include, first of all, the Energy, Environment, and Sustainability Standing Committee, which Mr. Grayson and I sit on. We work closely with the Environmental Commission, and I am so proud of our Environmental Commission. They are doing so many different projects and looking into things and investigating things and accomplishing things. Just a few highlights. The plastic bag ban that we passed a few months ago does go into effect on October 1st. Our EC members have been in touch with our businesses, and a reminder communication, a letter, will be sent to our businesses this week. So we will be interested to see how that works, and our EC members are available for any questions or assistance that are needed by our businesses. We are adding, Mr. Jorfi had mentioned a couple of ordinances that he's working on as part of the legislation standing committee, the bamboo ordinance and the EV charging station ordinance, both of which are really good ideas, and I thank you for pursuing that. We have, Mr. Carlson, I hope you're paying attention. We have coming out of the EC a request. We'd like to move forward with the ordinance to add associate members to the Environmental Commission. We've had many activities that have come up where we need additional volunteers, And we've discussed the importance of having additional members, associates, and so we would like to move forward with that ordinance. I'm hoping to have it so that we can introduce it in October. The Environmental Commission is also reviewing our tree ordinance that was looked at a number of years ago. They're looking to review it, perhaps updated, and that may be another ordinance that comes before the Township Committee either in October or November. Let's see here. I also, along with Mr. Jorfi, serve on the Transportation Advisory Committee, TAC. Many things that TAC is undertaking as well. I personally, myself, am part of the walking subcommittee of TAC, and the walking subcommittee has been working hard. In particular, we have one member, Rick By, who's done amazing mapping work. He's mapped locations around the township that have gaps in sidewalk coverage. And so we have this overview of gaps. We don't have every single one, but we have a lot of information about gaps. And this is a really great step forward as a beginning step for developing a plan to improve our sidewalk connectivity in Morris Township, both long-term, mid-range, and short-term. So we, between now and October meeting, we'll be looking at recommendations, sort of tossing around ideas for things that could be done, prioritizing what could be done in the short range, long range, etc. And I find this to be very exciting. There's many residents in Morris Township who've spoken to us about they'd like to see our town be more walkable and user-friendly for residents, and this is progress in that direction. Also, in regard to the Abbey actually came up at one of the Transportation Advisory Committee subcommittee meetings, and the discussion was that given all the concerns that have come up at the Abbey regarding traffic and parking, the question came up as to what could be done to reduce the number of vehicles that are going to the Abbey. So there was discussion of that, and the walking subcommittee did do a walk audit of the Abbey. We especially looked at sidewalks. We looked at the sidewalks that run, the existing sidewalks that are already there, that run along Punch Bowl Road to Old Turnpike, and then from there to the train station. We talked about the idea of encouraging people to come to the Abbey via train instead of by car. We discussed the similarities with the Paper Mill Playhouse. If you've ever been there, the people are encouraged to get there by train, get off at the Melbourne train station, and then walk to the theater. And the walk is made very appealing and friendly for walkers. And we have tossed around the idea of suggesting that as one of several different options for addressing some of the existing concerns about the Abbey that are on the table. And another suggestion that came up is encouraging RH to provide shuttle pickups from the Abbey. So a few conversations about options for discussing some of the concerns that are out there. I also want to highlight that resident participation in this committee is very important. One of TAC's purposes is to serve as a forum for discussing resident concerns and helping residents to be educated and informed and have your voice heard on transportation issues that affect all of us in Morris Township. We do have an ad hoc committee that is continuing to bounce around ideas for dealing with some of these safety and walkability concerns on Old Glen. And we have residents from Raymond and Sherman who have brought up various issues that was discussed at our last TAC meeting. And so these are just examples of neighborhood concerns, transportation concerns that are discussed and our recommendations are discussed at the TAC meeting. And I do expect TAC to also discuss some of the issues that may come up at the marketplace. As far as my Township Committee comments, I did want to follow up with a couple of comments about the outages. That the August outage was very concerning to everyone. Obviously, we do have a debrief being planned. This is very important to me. I think debriefs, you know, where some people call it a post-mortem, where you look back, you discuss what happened, you clarify there's a lot of different people, different situations, there's gaps in what people know and don't know, there's misinformation, there's questions. There's a lot for everyone to get up to speed on. I am personally hoping that we can also have Cablevision and Verizon included in that debrief, because there were, at least from my experience, more problems with them than I've ever dealt with before as part of an outage. I would also say, Mr. Grazel referenced the letter that we sent to BPU, and I thank Mr. Jorfi for his contributions to that as well. I wanted to share with everyone on the committee and the public tonight, there is a meeting scheduled on September 22nd with the mayors around Morris County and with a representative from BPU. So I request from you any suggestions you may have that you would like to me to bring forward as part of that conversation. This is the first time I remember that being done. Perhaps it was done and I just wasn't aware of it, but I'm glad to see this is a conversation. This is different than sending letters, and I'm glad this is taking place. My own comment, I think that the vegetation management aspect, trees, I think that's a very important issue that needs further discussion among all of us, the officials, residents, people from JCP&L. It's a very important issue. It's complicated, it's controversial, and the trees were a huge part of the August outage. So more to come on all of this. It's very important to all of us, and we will keep you up to date. Speaking of Cablevision, I did want to mention that we do post, many people don't know this, we post our Township Committee meetings on Cablevision every week, and Cablevision actually changes its schedule every year, effective October 1st. So effective October 1st, the Township Committee meetings will be airing on Friday from 7 to 9 instead of Monday from 7 to 9. So I guess football is a better time. Anyway, so that will be coming soon. I also wanted to just say that communication with residents is extremely important to me, and I am very glad that we are going to be, there's going to be a conversation here with the residents and with RH, and I'm glad to facilitate that. So I'm glad that's coming about. I also wanted to say that I'm very glad to be supporting the event that'll be coming up next week, Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. I do feel that it's a very important occasion. It's clearly a significant public health concern always, but especially in light of COVID's impact. And for all of these reasons, and in addition, I do have a personal connection to this. I personally know 2 people who took their own lives. And so I feel sort of personally touched by this. And I felt drawn to organize an educational event to raise public awareness about the causes of suicide and how to prevent it. So we will be carrying that out by Zoom next Thursday, 7 to 8:30, and the information about how to log in will be on our website. And finally, I would like to wish our Madam Clerk, Kathy Emilio, a very happy birthday. It's a special birthday for her. I'd like to thank her for all that she does, and I'd like to wish you a very special happy birthday today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. We'll spare you singing.
Oh, good. Thank you.
But we all wish you a very happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm concluded on my comments, and I believe next up we have our second public commentary. Oh no, sorry, consideration. No, yes, that's right, we do. We have our second public comment inquiry period. Is there anyone from the public who would like to ask any questions or make any comments?
James O'Reilly. This is his
This
third.
is it, we have 2 5-minute times per
Okay.
commentary.
Gotcha.
Oh, I won't need that. Jim O'Reilly, 50 Independence Way. I missed the tax appeals part. How significant are our tax appeals? What's the status? What's the dollar amount? Do you know?
I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Quinn.
Our exposure right now is limited. It's down. It's just a little over $1 million, mostly on the commercial side. Most everything else that's on the residential side was resolved at the county tax court, tax board. Any property that is assessed at more than $1 million has to go to the tax court. So there's a number of those pending, but I'm sure that we will adequately resolve them. But right now we're in a very good position on tax appeals, and there is money in reserve, so there wouldn't be any impact on the tax base if we're not successful in defending those tax appeals.
Thank you.
Mr. Quinn, just so you can clarify for the record, when you say $1 million worth of exposure, it's not $1 million worth of tax liability or taxes that are going to be coming in, it's the value of the property, correct?
What they're looking for in the refunds on the tax appeals.
They're looking for $1 million refund?
But you're looking at a number, not one property, you're looking at multiple properties, mostly being commercial. So that's, and your tax court is about 3 years behind. So when you finally get there, you're looking at a 3 to 4 year period. And that's where we usually, it becomes the negotiations, and oftentimes years are removed, and then you deal with the 1 year that you have to do. And we always try and do it as a credit rather than making a refund if we can. But the one process getting into the tax court, and Mrs. Diarango was very successful, as you know, at the Morris County Tax Board in defending those, but also on the fairness side, when she needs to make an adjustment, she makes that adjustment. And during the reassessment a number of years ago, somebody did not allow them into the house. They hired to assess it at the highest value because they couldn't get into the house. And then once we're able to get into the house, things change.
Very good. Thanks for that explanation.
Thank you.
For comparison's sake, our annual budget's about 35 million, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Reilly. I don't see anyone else with their digital hand up. This is your,
That's it.
that's it? Last call.
Yep.
Okay, all right, with that, seeing no one further who wishes to comment, can I have a motion to close public comment?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks.
night, everybody.
Consideration of monthly reports as circulated.
Second.
That is a roll call. No, that's a voice vote.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now we will pay our bills. $9,350,096.38.
I'll offer it.
Oh, we need to move it.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, a roll call, please.
Yes. Mr. Arvanites.
Yes.
Mr. Durfee.
Yes.
Mr. Mancuso.
Yes.
Mr. Grizel.
Yes.
Mayor Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
And with that, we have concluded our meeting tonight. I want to thank everyone for joining us. And We will be having our next meeting, special meeting, next Wednesday, September 23rd, be the continuation of our public hearing on the Abbey, and it will start at 7 o'clock, not 6 o'clock, as our previous ones did. So with that, I guess we'll say goodnight.
Good night, everyone, and thank you for the best wishes.
I'm just out of sync on these motions tonight.
I'll make a motion to adjourn, Mayor.
Thank you. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.